The dust from the creditor's boots still hung in the air when Sarah Malone realized she had 3 days to save everything her father had built. She stood in the doorway of the general store, her calloused hands gripping the wooden frame so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The leather ledger sat open on the counter behind her, the numbers written in her own careful hand telling a story she wished she could rewrite. $40. Due Friday. The bank manager, Mr. Thornton, had been clear about what would happen if she could not pay. The store, the small room upstairs where she slept, the shelves her father had built with his own hands before consumption took him 6 months ago, all of it would belong to the bank by Saturday morning. It was Tuesday afternoon in Victor, Colorado, in the spring of 1885, and the mining town buzzed with its usual chaos. Men shouted to each other across the muddy street. Wagons creaked past loaded with timber and equipment. Somewhere down the road, a piano played badly in one of the saloons. Sarah had lived here for 22 years, her entire life, and she loved this rough town perched high in the mountains, even when it threatened to swallow her whole. She stepped back inside and closed the door, shutting out the noise. The store smelled like coffee beans and tobacco, leather and lamp oil, familiar smells, safe smells. Her father had opened this place when she was just a baby, before her mother died giving birth to a brother who lasted only 3 days. It had always been just the two of them after that, and he had taught her everything. How to keep accounts, how to bargain with suppliers, how to spot a cheater trying to use weighted coins, how to stand firm when miners fresh from a lucky strike thought they could push around a woman alone. But he had not taught her how to compete when the big mining companies started bringing in their own supply warehouses. He had not taught her what to do when half her regular customers suddenly had cheaper options. He had not taught her how to survive when sickness took him so quickly she barely had time to say goodbye, leaving her with his debts and his dreams and nothing else. Sarah moved to the counter and ran her fingers over the ledger. She had done the calculations 100 times. Even if she sold everything in the store at full price, which was impossible, she would still come up short. She had already sold her mother's jewelry, the few pieces her father had kept in a wooden box under his bed. She had sold the good horse and kept only the aging mare that could barely pull the small cart. She had sold books, quilts, a silver picture frame. She had cut every expense she could think of cutting. The bell above the door chimed. Sarah looked up, composing her face into a pleasant expression. A miner she recognized, Tom Patterson, stomped in trailing mud. "Afternoon, Miss Malone," he said, pulling off his hat. His face was permanently gray with rock dust. "Need some tobacco if you have it, of course." Sarah reached for the jar on the shelf behind her. "The usual." "Yes, madam." She measured out the tobacco, wrapped it in brown paper, and took his coins. He tipped his hat and left. 15 cents. She had $40 to find. The impossibility of it sat in her chest like a stone. The afternoon passed slowly. A few more customers came and went. Sarah swept the floor, rearranged some stock, tried not to watch the clock on the wall. When the light began to fade, she locked the door and climbed the narrow stairs to her room. It was small but neat. A bed, a washstand, a trunk that held her few clothes, a single chair by the window. She sat in the chair and looked out at the street below. Victor sprawled across the mountainside in a haphazard collection of wooden buildings. Gold Creek ran through the center of town, and the mines dotted the hills all around, their skeletal structures dark against the evening sky. The town had grown fast when gold was discovered here, and fortunes rose and fell with brutal speed. Sarah had seen men arrive with nothing and leave rich. She had seen others lose everything to bad luck or bad judgment. She had never imagined she would be one of them. She made herself eat some bread and cheese, though she had no appetite. Then she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep did not come for a long time. Wednesday morning arrived with cold mountain air and bright sunshine. Sarah opened the store at 7 o'clock, the same as always. She had made a decision during the sleepless night. She would not give up. If she could not raise the money, she would at least fight until the very end. She would visit every person in town who owed her father money from old accounts. She would beg if she had to. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She made a list of names from the ledger. Most of the debts were small, $1 here, $2 there. Added together, they might make a difference. She closed the store at midday and began walking through town, knocking on doors. The first 3 houses yielded nothing. People either were not home or claimed they had no money. At the 4th house, a widow named Mrs. Chen answered. She owed $4 from a purchase made 2 years ago. "Miss Malone," Mrs. Chen said, surprise in her weathered face. "I did not expect to see you." "I am sorry to trouble you," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady, "but I am calling in the old debts from the store. I know it has been a while, but I find myself in difficult circumstances." Mrs. Chen's expression softened with sympathy. "I heard about your situation. The whole town is talking about it. Come in, please." Sarah stepped into the small, tidy house. Mrs. Chen gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table. "I do not have $4, Mrs. Chen said honestly, "but I have 2. Would that help?" Sarah felt her throat tighten with gratitude. "Every bit helps. Thank you." Mrs. Chen went to a cupboard and counted out the coins carefully. Sarah took them, added them to the small purse hanging from her belt, and stood. "Your father was a good man," Mrs. Chen said. "He extended credit to me when my husband died and I had nothing. I wish I could do more." "You have done more than enough," Sarah said. "Thank you." The afternoon continued in much the same way. Some people paid a little, some paid nothing, some were not home. By the time the sun began to set, Sarah had collected $11. Combined with what little she had saved, she now had $17 total, $23 short with 2 days remaining. She walked back to the store slowly, her feet aching. The mountain air had turned cold, and she wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. When she reached the store, she found a man waiting outside. He was tall and lean, dressed in dusty trail clothes with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. A horse stood nearby, a beautiful roan gelding that looked better fed than most animals in town. "Excuse me," Sarah said, moving toward the door. "I was closed for the afternoon, but I can help you now if you need supplies." The man turned, and Sarah caught her breath. Even in the fading light, she could see he was young, probably close to her own age, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. A faint scar ran along his left cheekbone. He touched the brim of his hat politely. "Miss Malone." His voice was low and had a rough edge to it, like someone who spent more time talking to horses than people. "Yes." Sarah unlocked the door and pushed it open. "Come in." He followed her inside and she lit the lamps. The warm glow filled the store, pushing back the shadows. The stranger stood just inside the door, looking around with the careful attention of someone who made a habit of noting exits and hiding places. "What can I help you with, mister?" Sarah moved behind the counter, grateful for the solid wood between them. "Name is Kane, he said. He took off his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "I am looking for a place to stay for a few days. The hotel is full up with mining company men. Heard you might have a room to rent." Sarah blinked. "Who told you that?" "Lady down the street. Runs a boarding house, but she is full too. Said you had a room upstairs you might be willing to rent short term." That would be Mrs. Patterson, always looking for ways to help, even if it meant sending strangers Sarah's way. The problem was, Sarah only had one room upstairs, and it was the one she lived in. But even as she started to shake her head, a thought occurred to her. She looked at Kane Farrell more carefully. His clothes were dusty but well made. His gun belt was worn but maintained. His boots were expensive. This was not a man struggling for every dollar. "I do have a room," she heard herself say, "but it is my own room. I would need to sleep down here in the store if I rented it to you." Kane frowned slightly. "I do not want to put you out of your own bed." "How much were you planning to pay?" Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. "What's fair?" $5 for 3 nights. It was outrageous and she knew it, but desperation made her bold. Kane did not even blink. "That works for me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, counted out 5 silver dollars and placed them on the counter. Sarah stared at the coins. $5, just like that. She now had $22, only 18 more to go. "The room is small," she said, gathering the coins with shaking hands, "but clean. There is a washstand and a decent bed. I will change the linens." "No need to go to trouble," Kane said. "I have slept in worse places than a small room, I promise you that." Sarah nodded and led him up the stairs. The room looked even smaller with a man like Kane Farrell standing in it. He set his saddlebags down and looked around with an expression of approval. "This is fine," he said. "More than fine. Thank you, Miss Malone." "Sarah," she said without thinking, then wondered why she had invited the familiarity. "Kane," he replied, and something in the way he said it made her aware of how alone they were, how close he stood, how the lamplight cast shadows across his face that made the scar more prominent. She backed toward the door. "I will let you settle in. If you need anything, I will be downstairs." He nodded, and she escaped down the stairs, her heart racing. What was she thinking, letting a stranger sleep in her room? But $5. $5 she desperately needed, and something about Kane Farrell made her think he was not dangerous, at least not to her. There was a steadiness in his eyes, a quiet respect in the way he spoke. Sarah made herself a rough bed behind the counter using some blankets from the stock. It was not comfortable, but it would do for 3 nights. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Kane moving around upstairs, the creak of floorboards, the sound of boots being removed. Eventually, everything went quiet. She must have slept because she woke to sunlight streaming through the store windows and the sound of someone moving around upstairs. She sat up quickly, disoriented, then remembered. Thursday morning. 1 day left. She still needed $18. Kane came down the stairs a few minutes later, looking more rested than he had the night before. His hair was damp like he had washed, and he had shaved. "Morning," he said. "Good morning." Sarah stood and began folding the blankets. "There is a cafe down the street that serves breakfast if you are hungry." "I remember it." Kane moved toward the door, then paused. "You open the store this early, in a few minutes." He nodded and left. Sarah hurried to make herself presentable, washing her face and hands at the small sink in the back room, smoothing her hair, putting on a clean apron. When she unlocked the front door, the town was already awake and moving. Wagons rumbled past. Men called greetings to each other. Somewhere a rooster crowed, late and off rhythm. The morning brought a steady trickle of customers. Sarah sold matches, coffee, a shovel, some nails, a bar of soap. She kept the coins separate in her mind, counting and recounting. By noon, she had made another $2, 24 total. 16 to go. Kane returned in the early afternoon. He bought beef jerky and hardtack, supplies for a man who spent time on the trail. "Heading out?" Sarah asked as she wrapped his purchases. "Not yet," he said. "Tomorrow probably. What brings you to Victor?" The question was too personal, too curious, but Sarah found she genuinely wanted to know. Kane looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Work. I was riding with an outfit down near Cripple Creek, but the job finished up. Thought I would head north, see what is available. There are always mines hiring, Sarah said. I am not much for underground work, Kane admitted. I prefer to see the sky. Sarah handed him his package. That will be 60 cents. He paid, and their fingers brushed as she gave him his change. The touch was brief but sent an unexpected warmth up her arm. She pulled back quickly, confused by her own reaction. Thank you, Kane said, and left. The afternoon dragged. Sarah's anxiety grew with every passing hour. Thursday afternoon bleeding into evening. Less than 1 day left. She was still $16 short. The number haunted her. She was closing up for the evening when the door burst open. A young miner she recognized, Billy Cooper, stumbled in. His face was flushed and his eyes were bright with excitement or drink or both. "Miss Malone," he shouted. "I struck it. I finally struck it." Sarah felt a flutter of hope. Billy had owed her father $12 for nearly a year. "Billy, that is wonderful. Congratulations." "I knew that claim would pay off," Billy said, pulling out a leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gold. "Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew. I am very happy for you," Sarah said carefully. "Billy, do you remember the debt you owe the store? $12 for supplies last year." Billy's expression changed, becoming guarded. "I remember. Could you pay it now? I truly need it." Billy clutched the pouch tighter. "I just struck gold, Miss Malone. I got plans for this money, big plans. I'm going to expand my claim, hire some men, really do this right." "I understand," Sarah said, forcing herself to stay calm. "But you have owed this money for a year. My father gave you credit when you had nothing. I am asking you to honor that debt." "Your father was a good man," Billy said, "but he is gone now and I need every dollar I got." "Maybe in a few months when the claim really starts producing. I need it now," Sarah said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to control it. "Billy, please. The bank is taking the store if I cannot pay $40 by tomorrow. I have spent 2 days gathering what I can. I am so close." $12 would make all the difference. Billy shifted uncomfortably. "That is real sad, Miss Malone, it truly is, but I cannot help you. I got my own future to think about." He turned and walked out, leaving Sarah standing behind the counter with tears burning in her eyes. The injustice of it choked her. Her father had helped Billy when no one else would, and now Billy had gold in his pocket and refused to pay what he owed. She sank onto the stool behind the counter and let herself cry. Great, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. She had tried so hard. She had done everything she could think of doing, and it was not enough. It would never be enough. "Sarah," she looked up to find Kane standing in the doorway. She had not heard him come in. She wiped at her eyes with her apron, embarrassed to be seen like this. "I am sorry," she managed. "The store is closed." Kane closed the door behind him and moved closer. "I heard some of what that fellow said. The bank is taking your store." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "How much do you need?" $40 by tomorrow. I have 24. It does not matter. I am not going to be able to raise the rest." Kane was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What if someone paid it for you?" Sarah looked up at him, confused. "What? What if someone paid the bank what you owe? Would that save the store?" "Yes, but I cannot ask anyone to do that. I have no way to pay them back." "What if they did not want to be paid back?" Sarah stood up, anger flashing through her grief. "I am not a charity case, Mr. Farrell. I appreciate the thought, but I will not take handouts from strangers." "Not a handout," Kane said calmly. "A deal." "What kind of deal?" He looked around the store, his expression thoughtful. "You need money, I need stability. A reason to stay in one place for a while. What if I became a partner in the store? I pay what you owe the bank, plus extra to help with operating costs." In return, I own half the business. Sarah stared at him. You want to buy into my store? Why? Kane moved to the window and looked out at the street. The last light of day painted everything in shades of orange and gold. I have been moving from place to place for 5 years, he said quietly. Cowboy work, ranch work, whatever I could find. It is a hard life, lonely. I have some money saved and I have been thinking it is time to settle somewhere. Put down roots. This seems like as good a place as any. You do not know anything about running a store, Sarah pointed out. I can learn. I am good with numbers and I work hard, and I am honest. You can trust me to do right by you. Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it frightened her, but it made no sense. Why would you want to tie yourself to a struggling business in a town you just arrived in? You could invest your money anywhere. Kane turned back to face her. Truth is, I have been running for 5 years, from myself mostly. A man can only run for so long before he has to stop and face things. This feels right. I cannot explain it better than that. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. She saw only steady sincerity in his eyes, and beneath that something else, a kind of loneliness that matched her own. How much are you proposing to pay? She asked. How much do you need? Not just for the bank, but to really get the store back on solid footing. Sarah thought about it. The $40 for the bank, at least another $30 for inventory and to catch up on some supplier accounts. $70 total. I will pay $80, Kane said. That leaves you some cushion for unexpected costs. $80. It was more money than Sarah had seen in months. It would solve everything, but it also meant trusting a man she had known for barely a day. I need time to think about this, she said. Kane nodded. Fair enough. But you do not have much time. When does the bank need payment? Tomorrow, by close of business. Then think about it tonight. Let me know in the morning. He left, and Sarah was alone with her thoughts. She climbed the stairs to check on the room, even though Kane was not there. It smelled like leather and soap and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her feel strange. She sat on the chair by the window and looked out at the darkening town. What choice did she really have? If she refused Kane's offer, she would lose everything. If she accepted it, she would keep the store but share ownership with a stranger. The second option was better than the first, but it still felt like giving up something important. Except, a small voice in her head whispered maybe it did not have to be giving up. Maybe it could be gaining something. A partner to help with the work. Someone to talk to during the long days. Someone who looked at her like Kane had looked at her, like she was worth listening to, worth helping. Sarah shook her head. She was being foolish, reading things into kindness that probably were not there. Kane Farrell was offering a business arrangement, nothing more. She needed to think about this practically. By the time she finally fell asleep on her makeshift bed behind the counter, she still had not decided. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Sarah woke with the sun and lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Today was the day. In a few hours, she would either walk into the bank with $40 or she would watch everything slip away. She heard Kane come down the stairs. He found her behind the counter, already dressed and trying to look more confident than she felt. "Morning," he said. "Good morning." Sarah stood and faced him. "I have thought about your offer." Kane waited, his expression neutral. "I want to accept it," Sarah said. "But I need to understand something first. Why are you really doing this? And please be honest with me." Kane leaned against the counter. "I told you the truth last night. I am tired of moving around. I want to settle somewhere, but there is more to it than that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My father owned a ranch in Wyoming. When I was 22, he died and left it to me. I was young and stupid and thought I knew everything. Within a year, I had run it into the ground, made bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, spent money I did not have. I lost everything he had built. Sarah felt her heart constrict at the pain in his voice. I have spent the last 5 years trying to forgive myself for that, Kane continued. Working hard, saving money, but never staying anywhere long enough to really try again. When I saw you last night, crying because you were about to lose your father's store, I saw myself. I saw a chance to do something right, to help someone keep what their father built since I could not keep what mine built. That is a heavy burden to carry, Sarah said softly. It is. But maybe helping you would lighten it some, and maybe I would end up with a reason to stay in one place, which I need whether I want to admit it or not. Sarah believed him. She could hear the truth in his words, see it in the way he held himself. Then yes, she said, I accept your offer. You pay $80, you own half the store, we run it together. Kane held out his hand. Partners? Sarah shook it. His hand was warm and calloused and much larger than hers. Partners. They walked to the bank together an hour later. Sarah's nerves made her stumble twice on the wooden sidewalk, and each time Kane steadied her with a hand on her elbow. The bank was a solid brick building, one of the few in town that was not made of wood. Inside, it smelled like paper and ink and money. Mr. Thornton, the bank manager, looked up from his desk when they entered. He was a thin man with round spectacles and a permanent expression of disapproval. Miss Malone, he said, I have been expecting you. You have the payment. I do. Sarah's voice came out stronger than she expected. And I would like you to meet my new business partner, Kane Farrell. Mr. Thornton's eyebrows rose. Business partner. Kane stepped forward and placed a leather wallet on the desk. I am buying into the store. Here is the $40 Miss Malone owes, plus another $40 I am investing in the business. I would like it documented that I now own 50% of Malone's general store. Mr. Thornton looked between them, clearly surprised. I see. Well, this is unexpected. He opened the wallet and counted the money carefully, then made notes in a large ledger. The debt is paid. Congratulations, Miss Malone, and welcome to Victor, Mr. Farrell. They left the bank with a receipt and a handshake deal that Mr. Thornton promised to have properly documented by a lawyer within the week. Sarah felt like she was floating. It was done. The store was saved. Thank you, she said to Kane as they walked back through town. I know I already said it, but thank you. You saved everything. We saved it together, Kane corrected. And now we have work to do. If we are going to make this business thrive, we need to figure out how to compete with those big mining company warehouses. They spent the rest of the day taking inventory, making lists, and planning. Kane had good ideas and was not afraid to ask questions. Sarah found herself relaxing around him, the initial awkwardness fading into something that felt almost comfortable. Almost like they had been working together for years instead of hours. That evening they closed the store and Kane cooked dinner on the small stove in the back room. It turned out he was a decent cook, better than Sarah, who had never had much patience for it. They ate together, talking about the store and the town and carefully avoiding anything too personal. Where will you sleep? Kane asked as they cleaned up. I can move to one of the saloons. They must have rooms. No, Sarah said quickly. You paid for the room upstairs. It is yours. I am fine down here. It does not seem right, you sleeping on the floor of your own store. It is only temporary. Once we have some money coming in, I can rent a room at a boarding house. Kane did not look convinced, but he did not argue. They said good night, and Sarah made up her bed behind the counter again. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Kane upstairs, and thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 days. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Kane and Sarah worked together to transform the store. They negotiated better prices with suppliers, expanded their inventory to include items the mining company warehouses did not carry, and stayed open longer hours. Kane was good with customers, especially the rough miners who sometimes tried to intimidate Sarah. He had a quiet authority that made men think twice about causing trouble. Sarah found herself watching Kane when he was not looking. The way he moved, efficient and graceful. The way he listened when people talked, really listened, giving them his full attention. The way he treated her like an equal partner, asking her opinion and respecting her decisions. She was falling for him. The realization came slowly, like watching the sun rise over the mountains. She did not want to fall for him. It complicated everything. They were business partners. He had never indicated he felt anything beyond friendship. And yet, she could not stop the way her heart jumped when he smiled at her, or the way her skin tingled when he accidentally brushed against her in the store's narrow aisles. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after they had become partners, a group of men rode into town. They wore the hard expressions of men used to violence, and their horses were lathered like they had been ridden hard. They tied up outside the store, and several of them came inside. The leader was a big man with a scarred face and cold eyes. He looked around the store with an expression of contempt. "We need supplies," he said. "Traveling through, need them quick." "Of course," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that prickled along her spine. "What do you need?" They rattled off a list. Sarah began gathering items, very aware of Kane standing behind the counter watching the men carefully. The big man noticed Kane too. "I know you," he said suddenly. "You are Kane Farrell." Kane did not respond, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten. "Used to ride with the McCready outfit, did you not?" The man continued. "Down in New Mexico. I worked for a lot of outfits," Kane said evenly. The man laughed, a harsh sound. "That is right, before you went soft and quit." "I left because the work crossed lines I was not willing to cross," Kane said. "There is a difference." The tension in the room ratcheted up. Sarah's hands shook as she wrapped the supplies. "What kind of lines?" the man asked, moving closer to Kane. "The kind that involve hurting people who do not deserve it." The big man's eyes narrowed. "You calling me and my boys no good?" "I am saying I made my choice and you made yours. Let it be." For a long moment, Sarah thought there would be violence. Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. Then the big man shrugged and turned back to the counter. "How much?" he demanded. Sarah told him, and he threw money on the counter. The men took their supplies and left. Sarah sagged against the counter, her legs suddenly weak. "Are you all right?" Kane asked, coming around to her. "Who were they?" Sarah asked. "What was that about?" Kane sighed. "I did not lie when I said I have been moving around doing cowboy work. But some of that work was rough. I worked for some people who were not always on the right side of the law. When I figured that out, I left. Those men were part of that life." Sarah looked at him, trying to reconcile this information with the man she had come to know. "Are you running from something illegal? Am I going to have the law coming after my partner?" "No," Kane said firmly. "I never did anything illegal. I just worked for people who did, and I left as soon as I realized what was happening. But men like that, they do not forget. They think leaving makes you a traitor. Are we in danger?" Kane hesitated. "I do not think so. They are just passing through, but I am sorry. I should have told you about my past before we became partners." Sarah thought about it. She should be angry, she knew. But mostly she felt relief that Kane was honest with her now, and that he had principles that made him walk away from easy money when it meant doing wrong. "We all have pasts," she said finally. "What matters is who you are now. And right now, you are my partner who has worked harder than anyone could ask, who treats me with respect, and who helped save this store. That is what I choose to focus on." Kane looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are a remarkable woman, Sarah Malone." "I am a practical woman," Sarah corrected, but her cheeks flushed with warmth. They did not speak of it again, but something had shifted between them. Sarah felt like they had crossed some invisible line, moving from acquaintances who worked together to something deeper. Summer arrived in full force, turning the high mountain valley into a riot of wildflowers and long, bright days. The store was doing well, better than well. With Kane's help, they had paid off all the old debts and were building up savings. Sarah moved into a room at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, and Kane continued to rent the room above the store. They fell into rhythms. Every morning, Sarah arrived early and Kane would have coffee already made. They would go over the day's plans together. During the day, they worked side by side, so in tune with each other that they often did not need to speak. In the evenings, they would sometimes take walks through town, talking about everything and nothing. Sarah's feelings for Kane grew stronger every day. She loved the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. She loved his rare smiles that transformed his serious face. She loved how gentle he was with the children who came into the store, always finding a piece of candy to give them. She loved how he never made her feel less than him because she was a woman, but Kane never gave any indication he felt the same way. He was kind, respectful, friendly, but nothing more. Sarah told herself it was enough, that she should be grateful for what she had. She told herself she should not want more. One Saturday evening in July, the town held a dance. It was an annual tradition, held in the largest saloon with the furniture pushed back and a trio of musicians brought in from Colorado Springs. Sarah had not planned to go, but Mrs. Chen insisted. "You are young," Mrs. Chen said. "You work too hard. Go and dance and have fun." So Sarah put on her best dress, a dark blue cotton with a white collar, and walked to the saloon. The place was already crowded, full of miners dressed in their cleanest clothes and women in bright dresses. The music was loud and energetic. Sarah stood near the door, suddenly shy, wondering why she had come. Then she saw Kane. He stood across the room, talking to a group of men. He wore a clean shirt and his dark hair was neatly combed. He looked up and their eyes met across the crowded room. Something passed between them, something electric that made Sarah's breath catch. Kane excused himself from the men and made his way through the crowd to her. "You came," he said. "Mrs. Chen insisted," Sarah said. "You? Same reason, except it was Tom Patterson who insisted. Said I needed to get out more." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then the music changed to a slower song and Kane held out his hand. "Would you dance with me?" Sarah's heart leapt into her throat. "I am not a very good dancer." "Neither am I. We will figure it out together." She put her hand in his and let him lead her onto the floor. His hand settled at her waist, and Sarah put her other hand on his shoulder. They began to move to the music, slightly off rhythm but together. Being this close to Kane was overwhelming. Sarah could smell the soap he had used, could see the faint stubble on his jaw, could feel the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress. She looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Sarah," he said quietly. "Yes, I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding. "What?" But before he could answer, there was a commotion near the door, raised voices, then a crash. The music stopped. Everyone turned to look. The big man from weeks ago, the one who had recognized Kane, stood in the doorway with several of his men. They were clearly drunk and looking for trouble. "Well, well," the big man said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "If it is not Kane Farrell, playing at being respectable." Kane's hand tightened on Sarah's waist, then he gently released her and moved to stand between her and the men. "You need to leave," Kane said calmly. "This is a public dance," the big man said. "We have as much right to be here as you. You are drunk and looking for a fight. I am asking you to leave before someone gets hurt." The big man's expression darkened. You always did think you were better than everyone else, too good to ride with us, too good to do what needed doing. I am not doing this here, Kane said. Leave or I will get the sheriff. The sheriff is 3 towns over dealing with a claim dispute, the big man said. Everyone knows that. So there is nobody to stop me from finally teaching you a lesson about loyalty. He reached for his gun. Kane was faster. His hand flashed to his own gun, drawing it with a speed that made Sarah gasp. But he did not fire. He pointed it steadily at the big man. Do not, Kane said quietly. Just turn around and leave. This does not have to end badly. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the other men with the big man put a hand on his arm. Come on, Jack, the man said. He is not worth it. Let's go find another place to drink. Jack glared at Kane for another moment, then slowly backed toward the door. This is not over, Farrell. One of these days you are going to pay for turning your back on us. I will take my chances, Kane said. The men left. The tension in the room slowly eased. People began talking again, and the musicians cautiously started a new song. But the joy had gone out of the evening. Sarah touched Kane's arm. Are you all right? He holstered his gun. I am sorry. I ruined the dance. You protected everyone here, Sarah said. That man was looking for violence. You avoided it. Kane looked down at her. Sarah, I think maybe I should leave Victor. Those men know I am here now and they are not going to let it go. If I stay, I am putting you and the store in danger. No, Sarah said firmly. You are not leaving. This is your home now. We will deal with whatever comes together. You do not understand what those men are capable of. Then help me understand. Talk to me. Trust me. Kane looked around the crowded saloon. Not here. Let us go somewhere we can talk. They left the dance and walked through the dark town. The summer night was cool and the stars were brilliant overhead. Kane led her to a spot near Gold Creek, where the water rushed over rocks and the sound provided some privacy. The McCready outfit I worked for, Kane began. They were rustlers. Stole cattle from ranches and sold them across state lines. When I took the job, I thought it was legitimate cowboy work. By the time I figured out what was really happening, I had been with them for 6 months. I confronted the leader, a man named Red McCready, and told him I was leaving. He did not take it well. Kane paused, staring at the water. He said if I left, I was stealing from him, said I owed him loyalty. I told him I did not owe loyalty to criminals. We fought. I won, but barely. I left that night and have been moving around ever since, trying to stay ahead of the reputation. That man tonight, Jack, Sarah said. He rode with the McCready outfit, he did, and he is the type who holds grudges. Sarah thought about it. So we need to be careful. Keep the store locked at night. Maybe you should carry your gun more often. You are not hearing me, Kane said, turning to face her. I am bringing danger to your doorstep. The smart thing would be for me to leave. The smart thing, Sarah said, moving closer to him, would be for you to stay and fight for what you have built here. You have a business. You have friends. You have a life that is honest and good. Why should you give that up because some criminal has a grudge? Because I do not want anything to happen to you, Kane said, and the raw emotion in his voice stopped Sarah's breath. Sarah, if they hurt you because of me, I could not live with that. Kane, Sarah said softly, why do you care so much about what happens to me? He looked at her for a long moment. The moonlight cast shadows on his face, making the scar on his cheek stand out. Because I love you, he said finally. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the first moment I saw you standing in that store, so determined to save what your father built. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you never give up. I love working beside you every day. I love how you hum when you are doing inventory. I love everything about you, and the thought of you being hurt because of my past is more than I can bear. Sarah's heart felt like it would burst. You love me, I do. I know I should not. I know I have no right to feel this way. You are a respectable woman and I am just a drifter with a bad past, but I cannot help it. You are not just anything, Sarah said fiercely. She reached up and put her hand on his cheek. You are the man who saved my store, the man who works harder than anyone I know, the man who treats me like an equal, the man who makes me laugh, the man I have fallen completely in love with. Kane's eyes widened. You love me, I do. So much that it terrifies me. Kane pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might disappear. Then Sarah kissed him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside for weeks, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. I am still leaving, he said. Not because I do not love you, but because I do. I will not put you in danger. Then I am coming with you, Sarah said. What? No, Sarah, you cannot leave the store. The store is just a building, Sarah said. You are what matters. If you leave, I leave. That is crazy. You have a life here. I have a life with you, wherever that is. Kane pulled back to look at her. You would really do that, give up everything here to come with me, in a heartbeat. But I do not think we should have to. I think we should stay and face whatever comes, together. Kane searched her face, looking for doubt or fear. He found only determination and love. You are the bravest person I have ever met, he said. Or the most foolish, Sarah said with a small smile. But I think brave sounds better. They talked for another hour, sitting by the creek making plans. They would stay in Victor. They would be careful but not afraid. They would build their life together, and if Jack and his men came back looking for trouble, they would deal with it. When they finally walked back through town, Kane held Sarah's hand. It felt right, natural, like they had been doing it forever. They stopped outside the boarding house where Sarah lived. I should let you get some sleep, Kane said. I do not think I will be able to sleep, Sarah admitted. Too much has happened tonight. Kane smiled and kissed her forehead. Try anyway. I will see you in the morning. Kane, Sarah said as he started to walk away. He turned back. Yes, I love you. His smile widened into something that transformed his whole face. I love you too. Sarah floated into the boarding house and up to her room. She lay in bed with her hand over her racing heart, replaying every moment of the evening. Kane loved her. She loved him. They were going to build a life together. The next morning, Sarah woke early and hurried to the store. Kane was already there, and the moment she walked through the door, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. Good morning, he said when they came up for air. Very good morning, Sarah agreed breathlessly. They worked together all day, but everything felt different now. Every glance carried weight. Every accidental touch sent sparks through Sarah. When they had a moment alone, Kane would steal another kiss, and Sarah would forget what she was doing. The following weeks were the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Kane were inseparable. They worked together during the day and spent their evenings walking through town or sitting by the creek, talking and dreaming about the future. The store continued to thrive. The town accepted their relationship with knowing smiles and the occasional bit of teasing. But the threat of Jack and his men hung over everything like a dark cloud. Kane kept his gun close and made Sarah promise to be careful. They hired a young man named Peter to help in the store, partly because they needed the help and partly because Kane wanted someone else around in case of trouble. August brought news that made everyone in Victor tense. There had been a series of robberies in the nearby towns. Stores and banks had been hit, always at night, always by a group of men on horseback. People whispered that it was Jack's gang, though no one could prove it. Kane increased the security at the store. He installed new locks on all the doors and windows. He and Sarah took turns staying late, making sure everything was locked up tight. Peter, young but eager, offered to sleep in the store some nights as an extra precaution. One night in late August, Sarah woke in her room at the boarding house with a feeling of dread. She could not say what had woken her, but something felt wrong. She dressed quickly and hurried through the dark streets to the store. She found Kane outside, staring at the building. Even in the darkness, she could see something was wrong. "Kane," he turned, and she saw the anger on his face. "They were here." Sarah looked at the store. The front window was broken, glass littering the sidewalk. She ran forward and Kane caught her. "Wait," he said. "Let me check inside first." He drew his gun and pushed through the door. Sarah followed despite his protest. Inside, the store was a disaster. Shelves had been overturned, products scattered across the floor, but as Sarah looked closer, she realized nothing had been stolen. This was not a robbery, it was a message. On the counter, stabbed through with a knife, was a note. Kane pulled it free and read it, his jaw clenching. "What does it say?" Sarah asked. "It says I have 1 week to leave town, or they will burn the store to the ground with everyone in it." Sarah felt ice run through her veins. "They are serious. I know, which is why I am leaving tomorrow, tonight even, right now." "No," Sarah said. "Sarah, they threatened to burn the store with everyone in it. That means you. I will not risk your life." "And I will not let you run," Sarah said. "We need to get help. Go to the next town and bring back the sheriff. We will organize the townspeople. There are good men in Victor who will not stand for this. By the time we organize help, a week will have passed, and even if we fight them off once, they will come back. This will never end." "Then we make it end," Sarah said. A plan was forming in her mind. "We set a trap." Kane looked at her. "What kind of trap?" "We let it be known that you are leaving. Pack up your things, make a big show of it. Then you wait here in the store with some trusted men. When Jack and his gang come to make sure you are really gone, you will be ready for them." Kane shook his head. "Too dangerous. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. We will plan it carefully. Kane, we cannot keep running from these men. We have to stand and fight, or we will be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives." Kane pulled her into his arms. "I cannot lose you. You will not. We are going to do this smart and careful, and we are going to win." They spent the rest of the night cleaning up the store and making plans. In the morning, they brought Tom Patterson and a few other trusted men into their confidence. Tom, a former soldier, thought Sarah's plan could work with some modifications. "We should involve more people," Tom said. "The whole town, really. Jack and his gang have been terrorizing the area for months. People want to fight back. They just needed someone to organize them." Over the next few days, Sarah and Kane quietly spread the word. Kane made a show of packing his belongings, telling people he was leaving to protect the town. But behind the scenes, a group of armed men prepared for a confrontation. The sheriff from the next town was sent for and arrived 2 days later with 3 deputies. The trap was set for Friday night, exactly 1 week after the threat. Kane's horse was packed and tied outside the store, making it look like he was really leaving. But inside the darkened store and in buildings nearby, 20 armed men waited. Sarah wanted to stay and help, but Kane absolutely refused. "You are the one thing I cannot focus on protecting and still do this right," he told her. "Please, go stay with Mrs. Chen. Let me know you are safe so I can concentrate." Sarah argued but eventually agreed. She kissed Kane goodbye, trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong, and went to Mrs. Chen's boarding house. She sat in her room with Mrs. Chen and 2 other women, waiting. The hours crawled past. Sarah prayed more fervently than she ever had in her life. She prayed for Kane's safety, for the safety of all the men waiting in the darkness. She prayed that the violence would be swift and final and that no innocent people would be hurt. Near midnight, they heard gunshots. Sarah jumped up, but Mrs. Chen held her back. "Wait," the older woman said. "You cannot help by running into danger." The gunshots continued for what felt like forever but was probably only a few minutes. Then silence. Sarah paced the room, straining to hear anything. More silence. Then finally voices in the street, footsteps, a knock on the door. Sarah ran downstairs and threw it open. Kane stood there, dirty and exhausted but alive. Sarah launched herself into his arms, sobbing with relief. "It is over," Kane said, holding her tight. "They came, we were ready. There was a fight, but we won. Jack and 2 of his men are dead. The rest are in custody, waiting for the sheriff to transport them for trial. You are not hurt, not a scratch. Neither is anyone else from town, though one of the deputies took a bullet in the arm. He will be fine." Sarah pulled back to look at his face. "It is really over. It is really over. No more threats, no more running. We are free to live our lives." The town celebrated the next day. A dance was organized, this time joyful and uninterrupted. Sarah danced with Kane for hours, laughing and dizzy with happiness. When they finally stepped outside for some air, Kane took her hand and led her to the now familiar spot by Gold Creek. "Sarah Malone," he said, dropping to one knee. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "Kane, I do not have a ring yet," he said. "I will get you one, the best one I can afford. But I cannot wait another day to ask you this. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner in everything for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Sarah said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Kane stood and kissed her, and Sarah felt like her heart would explode with joy. Everything they had been through, all the fear and struggle and uncertainty, had led to this moment. This man. This love. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Victor. Half the town attended. Sarah wore a dress borrowed from Mrs. Chen's daughter, and Kane wore a new suit he had bought specially. Tom Patterson stood up for Kane, and Mrs. Chen stood up for Sarah. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed Sarah with a tenderness that made her cry. They walked back to the store through a shower of rice and good wishes, hand in hand, ready to start their new life together. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, a sturdy building with 2 rooms downstairs and 1 large room upstairs. Sarah loved having a real home again, a place that was theirs. They continued to run the store together, and it prospered beyond their hopes. Kane proved to be an attentive and loving husband. He brought Sarah wildflowers for no reason. He learned to cook her favorite meals. He listened when she talked about her father and held her when she cried on the anniversary of his death. And every night, he told her he loved her, like he was afraid she might forget if he did not say it often enough. Sarah worked hard to make their house a home. She sewed curtains and planted a small garden. She learned to cook the dishes Kane remembered from his childhood. She made friends with the other wives in town and slowly built a community around them. The second year brought news that made them both nervous and excited. Sarah was pregnant. Kane was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure. He fussed over her constantly, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work 2 long hours. Sarah found it endearing and exasperating. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I am not going to break." "You are carrying the most precious thing in the world," Kane replied. "Our child. I am allowed to be cautious." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah was sick for the first few months, and the thin mountain air made her tired. But slowly, her body adjusted. She loved feeling the baby move inside her, loved watching Kane's face light up when he put his hand on her belly and felt a kick. In March of 1887, on a snowy morning that turned the world white and quiet, Sarah went into labor. Mrs. Chen and 2 other women attended her, and Kane wore a path in the floor downstairs with his pacing. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sarah thought she could not do it. But finally, as the sun was setting and painting the snow orange and pink, she heard a baby's cry. "A boy," Mrs. Chen announced, placing the tiny, red-faced infant in Sarah's arms. "A healthy boy." Kane was allowed upstairs a few minutes later. He approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the baby. When he saw his son for the first time, he sank onto the edge of the bed with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Kane whispered. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked. Kane thought for a moment. "My father's name was James. Your father was Michael. What about James Michael Farrell?" "James Michael Farrell," Sarah repeated. "I love it." They called him Jamie, and he became the center of their world. Kane was a devoted father, always willing to walk the floor with a crying baby or change a diaper. Sarah loved watching him with their son, seeing the gentleness in his strong hands, hearing him sing off key lullabies. The store continued to thrive, even with the addition of a baby. They hired more help, including a young woman named Anne who had come to Victor with her prospector husband and been widowed within 6 months. Anne was good with numbers and customers, and she adored Jamie. She became not just an employee but a friend. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Jamie grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy. He had Kane's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes and a personality that was entirely his own. Curious, energetic, and fearless, he kept his parents on their toes. When Jamie was 4, Sarah became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. In the spring of 1891, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma Grace, and Kane fell in love all over again. Emma was a quiet baby with blonde hair and blue eyes that Sarah said must have come from some distant relative because neither of them had blue eyes. Victor continued to grow and change around them. More families arrived. The mines produced steadily, and the town became more civilized. A proper school was built, and Jamie started attending when he turned 6. The wild days of the early mining boom were fading into memory, replaced by something more stable and permanent. Sarah and Kane's partnership deepened with every passing year. They knew each other so well they could communicate with just a glance. They still worked together in the store, though they had enough help now that they could take time off when they wanted. They took family trips into the mountains, teaching Jamie and Emma to fish and camp. They hosted dinners for friends. They went to church on Sundays and town meetings on Thursdays. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kane surprised Sarah with a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had left Victor together in years, and it felt like a grand adventure. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in restaurants, went to the theater. For 3 days, they were just Sarah and Kane again, not Mom and Dad or the proprietors of the general store. On their last night in Denver, as they walked back to the hotel under a sky full of stars, Kane pulled Sarah into his arms. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "This life. Staying in Victor. Marrying a drifter cowboy with a questionable past." Sarah looked up at him, seeing the face she loved more than anything. The years had added lines around his eyes and some gray to his hair, but to her, he was more handsome than ever. "Not for one single second," she said. "You gave me everything I ever wanted. A partner. A family. A life full of love. How could I regret that?" Kane kissed her, and Sarah felt the same thrill she had felt the first time, all those years ago by Gold Creek. "I walked into your store on a Thursday afternoon," Kane said, "thinking I just needed a place to sleep for a few nights. I had no idea I was about to find my home, my purpose, the love of my life. I was about to lose everything," Sarah replied, And then you walked in and paid my debt twice over. You gave me back my father's store, but more than that, you gave me a future I had not dared to dream about." "We gave each other a future," Kane corrected. "Partners, remember, partners," Sarah agreed. "In everything." They returned to Victor refreshed and more in love than ever. The years continued to pass in a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. Jamie grew into a smart, responsible young man who talked about becoming a lawyer. Emma developed a love for music and could play the piano beautifully by the time she was 12. The store evolved with the times. When the mines started to produce less, they adapted, bringing in supplies for the farmers who were starting to move into the valley. When the railroad finally reached Victor in 1898, they were ready with a catalog business that shipped goods all over Colorado. Sarah watched with pride as Kane became a respected member of the community. He served on the town council. He helped settle disputes. He mentored young men who were trying to make their way in the world. The wild cowboy with the questionable past had become a pillar of Victor's society, and no one was prouder of that transformation than Sarah. In 1900, when Sarah turned 37 and Kane turned 40, they decided to expand the store. They purchased the building next door and knocked down the wall between them, creating the largest general store in the county. Jamie, now 13, worked in the store after school. Emma, at 9, was still too young to work regularly, but she loved helping her mother arrange displays. One evening, after the store had closed and the children were home doing homework, Sarah and Kane stood in the expanded space, looking around at what they had built together. 15 years ago, Sarah said, I stood in a much smaller version of this store, crying because I thought I was about to lose everything. I had $40 to raise by Friday, and it seemed impossible. And I walked in on a Thursday, Kane said, putting his arm around her waist, and paid it twice over. Best investment I ever made. You got a pretty good deal, Sarah teased. Half a struggling store and a stubborn woman who did not know the first thing about trusting people. I got everything I ever wanted, Kane corrected. A business, a home, a family, and a woman who taught me what it means to be truly loved. Sarah leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. We built something good here, did we not? We built something extraordinary, Kane said. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us, grandchildren to spoil, the business to continue growing, adventures to have. Growing old with you is going to be an adventure, Sarah said. The best kind, Kane agreed. They locked up the store and walked home through the darkening town. Lights glowed in windows. Voices drifted from houses where families gathered for the evening meal. Victor had become a true community, and Sarah and Kane were woven into its fabric. Jamie eventually did become a lawyer, graduating from a university in Denver and returning to Victor to open a practice. He married a teacher named Lucy, and they gave Sarah and Kane 2 grandchildren, both boys who loved to hear stories about the old days when Victor was still wild. Emma became a music teacher and married a banker from Colorado Springs. They had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, who visited Victor every summer. Emma never moved far, and Sarah loved having her daughter close enough to see regularly. The store remained successful well into the new century. Kane and Sarah eventually hired a manager to handle the day-to-day operations, giving them more time to enjoy their grandchildren and each other. They took trips, explored Colorado, and even traveled to California once to see the ocean. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town threw them a party. It seemed like everyone in Victor attended. People stood up and told stories about how Sarah and Kane had helped them over the years, how they had extended credit during hard times, how they had donated goods to families in need, how they had always treated everyone with respect and kindness. Sarah cried through most of the speeches, overwhelmed by the love in the room. When it was Kane's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Sarah up beside him. 25 years ago, Kane said, I was a man with no roots, no home, and no hope for the future. Then I met Sarah Malone and everything changed. She taught me what it means to build something lasting. She showed me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. She gave me children and grandchildren, a business, and a place to belong. Every good thing in my life started the day I walked into that store on a Thursday afternoon and decided to stay. Sarah stood on her toes and kissed him, not caring who was watching. The room erupted in applause and cheers. They danced that night like they had danced at their wedding, surrounded by friends and family, moving together with the ease of two people who knew each other completely. When the party finally wound down and they walked home under a sky full of stars, Sarah felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. Happy? Kane asked. More than I ever dreamed possible, Sarah replied. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. They buried friends who had become like family. They celebrated births and weddings. They watched Victor continue to change and grow, from a rough mining town into a real city. Kane's hair went completely gray, and Sarah's followed suit. Their hands developed age spots and their movements slowed. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. On a warm summer evening in 1910, when Sarah was 47 and Kane was 50, they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter floating on the breeze. "Do you remember that first night?" Sarah asked. "When you offered to become my partner?" "I remember everything about those days," Kane said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even with tears on your face. I remember how brave you were, facing the loss of everything but refusing to give up. I remember the exact moment I knew I loved you." "When was that?" "When you said you would not take charity, that you were not someone who needed to be rescued. You wanted a partnership, an equal arrangement. In that moment, I knew you were someone special, someone worth staying for." Sarah reached over and took his hand. Their fingers intertwined automatically, fitting together perfectly after so many years. "I used to think you saved me," Sarah said. "That day you walked into the store and paid my debt. You saved my father's business and gave me a future. But the truth is, we saved each other." "We did," Kane agreed. "I was lost, and you gave me a home. You gave me a reason to stop running and start living." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the mountains. The grandchildren eventually came inside, tired from playing. Emma and her family were visiting for the week, and the house was full of noise and laughter and life. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah and Kane lay together in the darkness of their bedroom. Kane's arm was around her and her head rested on his chest. They had done this thousands of times, but it never got old. "Kane," Sarah whispered. "Yes, thank you. For what?" "For walking into my store that Thursday, for staying, for loving me, for giving me this life." Kane pulled her closer. "Thank you for letting me stay, for trusting me, for building this life with me. Every good thing I am, every good thing I have done started with you." Sarah lifted her head and kissed him softly. "I love you. I love you too. Forever." They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, two people who had found everything they needed in each other. The years rolled on, bringing them into old age with grace. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, their 40th, their 50th. Their children gave them 9 grandchildren in total, and those grandchildren eventually gave them great-grandchildren. The store they had saved together was passed down to Jamie, who ran it with the same care and dedication his parents had shown. Victor changed around them, growing from a mining town into a tourist destination as people discovered the beauty of the high Colorado mountains. But through all the changes, the Farrell name remained synonymous with honesty, hard work, and integrity. Kane and Sarah grew old together in the house on the edge of town. Their bodies slowed and weakened, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. They spent their days sitting on the porch, receiving visits from their extensive family, telling stories about the old days, and simply enjoying each other's company. On a crisp October morning in 1928, when Sarah was 65 and Kane was 68, they sat on the porch as usual, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. The aspens on the mountainside had turned gold, and the air smelled like wood smoke and coming winter. "It has been a good life, has it not?" Sarah said. "The best life," Kane agreed. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, the threats from Jack's gang, the struggles to keep the store running, especially not those parts," Kane said. "Those struggles made us who we are. They taught us we could face anything as long as we faced it together." Sarah smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Partners in everything." "Partners in everything," Kane echoed. They sat together as the sun rose higher, warming the cool morning. Their great-grandchildren would visit later, bringing chaos and joy. But for now, it was just the two of them, the way it had been in the beginning. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would echo through generations. Kane looked down at his wife, at the woman who had changed his entire life with her courage and determination. Her hair was completely white now, and her face was lined with age, but to him, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her. "Sarah." She looked up at him with eyes that still sparkled with intelligence and humor and love. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every moment, every choice, every struggle, it was all worth it to end up here with you." Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but they were happy tears. "Me too. 1,000 times over, me too." They kissed, a gentle touch of lips that held 43 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. The sun continued to rise, bringing light to the valley and warmth to the day. Inside the house, family would soon stir, and the day would begin in earnest. But for this perfect moment, there was just Kane and Sarah, two people who had found forever in each other's arms. Their love story had started with a debt and a desperate need, with $40 due on a Friday and a cowboy who walked in on Thursday and paid it twice over. But it had grown into something far beyond money or business or practical arrangements. It had become a testament to the power of love, commitment, and partnership. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most desperate moments, if you are brave enough to reach for them. And as the morning sun bathed Victor, Colorado, in golden light, Kane and Sarah Farrell sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, and the love that had sustained them through every storm. It was a happy ending that was really just another beginning, another day in a life well lived, another chapter in a love story for the ages. Years later, long after Kane and Sarah had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their story would be told and retold. People would speak of the woman who almost lost everything and the cowboy who helped her save it. They would talk about the partnership that became a love story, about two people who chose each other every single day for more than 50 years. The store still stood on Main Street in Victor, though it had been expanded and modernized over the years. Above the door, a sign proclaimed Farrell's General Store ESD, 1885. Inside, photographs covered one wall, showing the evolution of the store and the family that had built it. At the center was a picture of Sarah and Kane on their 50th wedding anniversary, standing in front of the store, hands clasped, looking at each other with a love so evident it made people smile just to see it. Their descendants carried on the values they had instilled: honesty, hard work, kindness, and the belief that true partnership meant facing life's challenges together. The Farrell name became woven into the fabric of Victor's history, a reminder of what was possible when two people committed fully to each other and to building something meaningful. But more than the business or the legacy or the family they created, what endured was the love itself. The kind of love that transforms two strangers into soulmates, that turns desperation into hope, that builds something lasting from the smallest beginning. It all started with $40 due on a Friday, a cowboy who walked in on Thursday and paid it twice over, and two people brave enough to bet on each other when they had nothing left to lose. And from that beginning came a love story that would echo through generations, proving that the most extraordinary things often start with the simplest acts of kindness, courage, and faith in each other. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. Kane and Sarah Farrell had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, that was the greatest success of all.